pleasant day, everyone. Me and my classmates will be presenting the sources of contamination and its prevention. But before we start, let us introduce ourselves first. I am Antoinette Caneda Silo.
It's me, Mylene, and Lumapat.
I am Leia Seracino.
I hope you will enjoy and learn something new from our video.
A pleasant day, everyone. So I am Mylene and Lumapat, and for today's video, let's talk about food contamination. So food contamination is generally defined as foods that are spoiled or tainted because they either contain microorganisms such as bacteria or parasites, or toxic substances that make them unfit for consumption. So, contaminants from a variety of sources are widespread in our home. So, there are 4 sources of contamination. So, we have here physical contamination, chemical contamination, microbial, and allergenic contamination. Physical contamination happens when food has been contaminated by a foreign object. So, it can occur at any stage of food delivery and preparation process. So, some common examples of physical contaminants include glass, metal, rubber, bone, wood, stone, and plastic. The second one is chemical contamination. So, chemical contamination happens when food becomes contaminated by some kind of chemical substance. So, chemicals such as detergent, sanitizer, and other cleaning products that are used frequently in the kitchen for cleaning and disinfections. So, it's unsurprising that they can contaminate foods. So, contamination may occur from preparing food on a surface that still has chemical residue on it, or if someone sprays cleaning chemicals close to uncovered food.
Hello everyone, I am Leia Seracino and I will continue to report the sources of contamination. So let's talk about the third and fourth types of food contamination. So the third types of food contamination is microbial contamination of foods. When you say microbial, it is an organism of microscopic size which may exist in its single-celled form of cells. Microbial contamination happens when a food has been contaminated by microorganisms including bacteria, viruses, mold, fungi, and toxins. This can happen through various means. For example, undercooked chicken can give rise to Campylobacter. It is a genus of gram-negative bacteria that can infect the gastrointestinal tract and cause diarrhea, fever, and cramps to humans. During the rearing and slaughtering of animals, the salmonella that lives in animal intestine can transfer into food products. Salmonella is a genus of root-shaped gram-negative bacteria that can generally cause diarrhea and typhoid fever. Let's move to the last type of food contamination. And the last type is the allergenic contamination of food. When you say allergenic, it is medically defined as any substance, often some kind of protein, that triggers an allergic reaction in a person who is sensitive to it, or any substance capable of inducing an allergy. Allergenic contamination occurs when a food that causes an allergenic reaction comes into contact with other food. For example, if the same knife used to cut the bread, then somehow it's used to cut the fish.
But before I proceed to present the ways of preventing contamination, let me give you a short recap first about what is contamination. Contamination is an unwanted impurity that has found its way into a particular substance. Contamination can be minimized or avoided altogether by following the appropriate sanitation procedures, good manufacturing procedures, and procedures for employee hygiene. In order to avoid contamination, it is important to avoid contamination of meat and poultry whenever possible. This includes inadvertent contamination or cross-contamination from the live animal, processing procedures and equipment, employees, and the environment. There are 3 ways to prevent contamination. First, preparing food hygienically, use different tools, utensils, plates, and chopping boards for raw and cooked food. This way will help individuals to prevent contamination or foodborne illness. This will also prevent known illnesses such as nausea, stomach cramps, diarrhea, vomiting, and even fever. Individuals must use different tools and utensils upon handling different ingredients for every dish they make. Individuals must use different types of chopping boards for every dish they make, such as white chopping board for bakery and dairy products, yellow chopping board for cooked meats, brown chopping board for rooted vegetables, red chopping board for raw meats, blue chopping board for raw fish, and lastly, green chopping board for salad, fresh fruits, and leafy vegetables. By doing this way, we can prevent contamination. The second way to prevent contamination is wash utensils, plates, and chopping boards for raw and cooked food thoroughly between tasks. This way helps individuals to stop the spreading of bacteria, viruses, and even parasites within the workplace. Individuals must also follow both WHO Golden Rules for Safe Food Preparation and HACCP principle, the Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point principle, to secure the safety and preventing contamination that might also lead to dangerous risk or even death to individual. The last way to prevent contamination is wash your hands before and after touching raw food and before you handle a ready-to-eat food and even tools and utensils. This way is essential because it helps individuals to prevent spreading the causes of contamination upon handling, preparing, and serving the food. Washing our hands with soap and water and following the appropriate ways to prevent contamination will reduces the possibilities of spreading contamination within the workplace. This will keep our food safety and healthy. Again, we have 4 sources of contamination. Those are physical contamination, chemical contamination, microbial contamination, and allergenic contamination. There are 4 ways to prevent physical contamination. First, immediately replace a damaged equipment. This is to prevent individuals to do a physical contact with that equipment and to avoid further hazard or risk that might happen within the workplace. Is check for and report for any fault with equipments and safety mechanisms. This is to know if there are some malfunctions with that equipment, and it is for to avoid also the possible risk that might happen if that equipment isn't checked by the employee. The third one is maintain a thorough pest control system in the place. It is to prevent physical contact with the pest in the workplace and avoid contamination with the food that the employees are preparing and serving to their clients. Last part is implement and follow dress code principle. This is to be aware how to prevent physical contamination. If you are like wearing some accessories, you must not wear and must be wear personal protective equipment or PPE so that you can avoid physical contamination within your workplace upon dealing your work. There are 3 ways to prevent chemical contamination. First, wash all the fruits and vegetables prior to use. It is to avoid chemicals that was in the fruits and vegetables before it was been harvested. The second way to prevent chemical contamination is keeping all chemicals away from cooking and preparing surfaces when the food is present. This is to avoid some possible risk or accidents that might happen if the chemicals are around the workplace, or the possible that it might mix through the ingredients that the dish was preparing. The third way to prevent chemical contamination is to store all chemicals away from food items. It is to avoid the aroma of the chemicals that might mix to those food items, such as like if you're having an apple or those perishable foods or non-perishable foods. There are 4 ways to prevent microbial contamination. First, wash your hands with good technique. It is to avoid bacteria and viruses that might in your hand. The second way to prevent microbial contamination is that sick people must stay at home from work. It is to avoid bringing the bacteria and viruses that causes you to sick to your workplace. The third way to prevent microbial contamination is that clean and sanitize all surfaces and equipment with the correct product. It is to secure that there is no bacteria or viruses or parasites that might be in your workplace. The fourth way to prevent microbial contamination is that wear the right gloves, such as wearing personal protective equipment for the PPE. It is to avoid the possibilities that it might spread the contamination within your workplace. There are 3 ways to prevent allergenic contamination. First, cleaning utensils before usage. It is to avoid dust or possible allergens that might be in the utensils that you are going to use upon preparing or serving a food. The second way to prevent allergenic contamination is washing your hands between preparing dishes. It is to avoid bringing the bacteria and viruses that our eyes can see to your food that you are preparing for. The last way to prevent allergenic contamination is storing ingredients and prepared foods separately. It is to avoid possible contaminations that might be mixed with the prepared foods and those ingredients. Overall, contamination is an unwanted impurity that has found its way into a particular substance. And in order to prevent it, we individuals must follow the appropriate sanitation procedures of the good manufacturing practices, and even hygiene. Because I believe that health is wealth and cleanliness is next to wealthiness. I hope you enjoy and learn something new throughout our video. Stay safe and God bless everyone.